Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Fallon and today I'm going to be sharing with you how I like to make a quilt out of jean fabric. So I had a bunch of old jeans lying around and I thought I need to repurpose these and make them into a quilt. I've made a couple jean quilts before and I absolutely love making them because they are so durable. This time I want to add in some fabric from a jelly roll. So I'm going to talk to you about how I'm going to do that and kind of make the jean material and the jelly roll closer to the same thickness so that it's a little easier for me to sew. So come on in and take a closer look at what I am doing today. All right, so as you can see, I already have my jeans cut up. They are in 6.5-inch squares. And I have my jelly roll here, but I also have some strips here that I'm going to talk to you about. Now, I just wanted to go through really quickly to show you how I like to cut down my jeans for getting the most out of them for creating squares or strips or anything like that. So what I usually do is I first cut the jeans in half. So what do I mean by that? I cut right down the center line because you have this zipper here that will kind of get in the way. So I cut a hole to open it up, and then you have this zipper here that would get in the way of creating any strips or squares. So I cut right by that, and then I cut up the seam here. Doesn't need to be pretty or anything because you're going to be squaring everything up in the end. So I'm just going to move one out of the way because you would do the same thing for both sides. So after I get it cut like that, and now let me tell you, this is a method I like to use if I'm not going to keep any of this detail on. If I'm not going to use the seam or not going to use pockets, this is how I like to do it. Sometimes it is fun to use those aspects in a bag or in a quilt, but if you're not going to, I think this is the way to go about doing this so that you get the most out of the fabric. All right, so the reason I cut away the seams is because they can honestly be really hard to sew through anyway. So depending on your machine, it might be a lot less stressful if you just get rid of those seams. So after I cut down that seam, I'll turn the jean over because along the outside of the leg, there's usually another seam going down there, and I'll cut that as well. So I'll cut right next to that seam, and you can see, you know, I'm not being super careful about, you know, clean cuts or anything like that because you're going to be squaring this all up later. So I'm going to set one leg aside, or one half of a leg, and then this is when you can start cutting your squares or your strips or whatever you want to do. I have a bit of wrinkles through here, but so before I would do that, I'd probably try to press that and iron it out. Whatever I need to do to get nice, clean cut lines. But for my 6.5-inch squares, I just lined my largest ruler up here that just our longest, that just happens to be 6.5 inches wide. And I would just cut straight along both sides, along the end, get it nice and squared up, and then just after I got that strip made, I would just cut out all of my squares. When you get to the wider side, depending on how wide the leg is and what size squares you're getting, because maybe you're not making the same size quilt that I am, you know, it may make more sense to try to angle your ruler a different way or cut along the sides before you square up at 6.5 and try to get more up here. However you want to do it, but this way everything lays flat for you because you're not worrying about seams moving everything, and you can get the most out of your pair of jeans. So there you go. That's how I break down my jeans to cut them up for patchwork. Now, like I said, I already have, you know, all of these cut. I'll put in the description how many I'm using for the size quilt I'm making today, so in the measurements as well, so you'll have all of that easily on hand. Now let's talk about the other strips I have here. This is not actually white fabric or anything. It is actually a woven interfacing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to be adhering this on to the wrong side of my fabric strips here. So I'll go through these and pick out the ones that I want to use for this project. You know, depending on the size quilt, maybe I'll use all of them. Maybe I'm just going to use some of them. Maybe I'm going to bring in some other fabric from another jelly roller that I cut up myself. Sometimes as I work, I kind of decide those different things, you know, based on what I want everything to look like. But what I'll do is go through here and I'm going to pick out just 3 strips to start with. So I'll pick out the ones that I want to use, and I'm going to try to get a red one that has a lot of blue in it and that has kind of a different texture to it. So a different pattern, so I get a lot of contrast. And then I want to get one that has a lot of white still in it. And I think I might choose, that one kind of has a lot of blue, like this might be my white actually, because that is, yeah, I think I'll count that as my white, even though it has a lot of the deep navy in it. So what I'll do each time is pick out 3 strips, and I'm going to iron some of this interfacing onto the wrong side. And like I said, this is a woven interfacing. You can look in the comments below. I'll put a link to the one that I am using. But if you can see on video, one side is kind of shiny and you'll feel that it's a different texture. It's kind of smooth rather than having the texture of a cotton. So that is actually the glue on the woven interfacing. And the reason I'm using woven interfacing is because it'll just kind of add a little more stability to the jelly roll strip without adding any stiffness. It's not going to be like stiff, like a thicker, like a leather. You know how some of like Decoville will turn the feel of a cotton into kind of more of a leather. This won't do that. It'll still kind of have the drape of a fabric, but just a little thicker. And I think it'll pair a lot better with my jean doing this and won't have a chance of being under the presser foot and bunching up. And you know, just the texture will be a little bit closer, and I think it'll work a lot better for me. So I'm going to iron this onto the wrong side of all of the jelly roll strips that I'm going to be using. And then I'm going to sew my strips together in groups of 3 lengthwise, and I'm going to try to keep the pattern of red, white, so this one here, and blue. So I'll be sewing these strips together lengthwise, red, white, and blue. Then after I get them sewn, I'm going to press all the seams in the same direction, and I'm going to cut these down into 6.5-inch squares to match my jean squares. Okay, so I'm going to work through all those steps, and then I'll show you how I'm going to lay out the jeans and my strips of fabric. Okay, so now that I have all of my strip sets cut and all of my jeans cut, I'm going to start arranging the layout of the quilt. And what I'm going to do is sew these together in groups of 2 and then bring them together as groups of 4. Now you could just lay everything out on a design board or something like that and get everything the way you want it that way, but I feel like this way is going to be easier to sew everything together, and it's kind of going to have a scrappy look anyway. So I'll just be bringing a strip set together with a pair of jeans, and if you see, I'm going to have a row of the strips going horizontal, and then the next row will go vertical. So that's how my layout's going to be. You could just leave them all going the same direction if you'd like. I just think this will add some interest to the quilt. So I'm going to get started with sewing these. So I'm going to bring them together. So a 1/4 inch seam right along the edge. And then after I get all of these sewn, I'm going to be pressing the seams toward the jeans. And that way I'll be able to nest all the seams nicely that way. All right, so for my quilt, I'm sewing these 4 blocks together where I have a jean and strips going horizontal, strips going vertical, and another pair of jeans. I'm sewing them into strips where those 4 blocks, I'm using 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. So here is one strip to show you. So I'm sewing these together in a strip. And then so that my quilt is just a tad longer than it is wide, I made 4 blocks that are just the jean and the horizontal strip. So there's 4 of these that I'm going to be sewing together to make 1 extra row on the bottom of the quilt. So that will be 1 final strip that I'm sewing. All right, so when you're sewing all these, a little tip I want to give you, especially if you are using interfacing on your fabric and if you're using jeans that have a lot of stretch to them. See how much stretch this has because of how I cut it? And a lot of women's jeans right now have a lot of stretch in them. So because of that, it can be really tricky sometimes sewing denim. And I want to show you where I was struggling a little bit. If you can see here, I have some gathering because I was bringing it together to try to make my seams meet. Once I get this all finished, I'm not going to notice this anymore. My seams are meeting nicely. That's what you're really going to see. But if you don't want to fuss with that, I've been playing around with sewing these, and I found that, and this works well with any stretchy fabric you might be using. If you're using one that is stretchy and one that is not, if you put the stretchy side down to your feed dogs on your sewing machine and put the side that is interfaced or a little more stable fabric up by your presser foot, it's going to make it a lot more easier for you. So I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So I'm lining up my 2 strips here. I have fabric that's going up and down and fabric that's going side to side. So I have it lined upright. I'm going to put these right sides together. And when I go to the sewing machine, you can see, well, Fallon, when you're sewing across here, you're going to be going across one side that has your interface fabric. But when you get to the jeans, it's just going to all stretch and bunch up on you, which is what it's been doing for me. So this takes a little bit longer, but what I've been doing is I'll sew across here, then I will stop sewing here, skip over to the next section, make sure my seams are lined up, I'll sew across here and keep doing that all the way across. Then I will flip what I'm sewing and come back, and I'll have these sides with the jeans. These segments are already sewn, so it's kind of like it's basted in place for me, and I'll just sew straight across here. And it works so nicely. So I'll go show you that right now. All right, so I'm gonna line up here. I have my 1/4 inch foot on, and so I'll make sure where I start sewing, I'll make sure it's all nice and lined up. And I don't have any pins in here or anything like that. I'm just feeling along the way and making sure everything's lined up. So I'll kind of keep this pinched with it nested, and I'll sew to there. And this takes more time, yes, but I personally think in this instance it's worth it, because if I sewed across here, it would just keep stretching and bunching up, and I would just get frustrated by it. So I'm gonna back stitch a little and just cut this off here. And then I'm going to skip the jeans section. And sure, I could flip this and go back and forth or something like that, but I feel like this just seems to work for me. And just going straight across here. So I'm just lining up the seams here, making sure they meet nicely. Put them under the presser foot. You can put your needle down here if you want to hold it in place, and then I'm just going to adjust and make sure this still lines up. Then I know that I have everything lined up properly, and I'll start sewing. And because this is nice and stabilized here, and the feed dogs are helping make sure everything is fed through evenly and nicely, I'm not getting any bunching even with that stretchy fabric on the bottom. And here I just sew right over where that seam is so that that's all nested nicely and held in place. So on the other side, I'm going to find those segments where the jeans are up, and I'm going to sew across those. So on this side, I'm just going to sew across where the jeans were up, and I accidentally left that seam a little more open than I wanted to. So I'm going to hold that down with my stiletto when I get to it, because I want all the seams folded towards the jeans. So on this side, I just sew across where I've already sewn, where the jeans were down on the other side. I don't think it's a big deal. If you don't want to use up that extra thread, you could just skip that jean portion that's already sewn and not sew over it. But mainly on this side, I'm just catching the sides that weren't sewn before, where the interface fabric is up on this side. All right, so here is the finished quilt. I really think this is a fun pattern, and it's such a fun way to use up some old jeans that you may have lying around, repurpose them. It's a fun way to use up some jelly roll strips that you may have on hand. And it's really easy to add on more strips and segments and really get the size that you are wanting for your quilt. So if you give this quilt a try, I would love to hear from you, see what you think. Let me know what you think of the one I made. I think it was a lot of fun, and I can't wait to make another one. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye.